At some point, we all hear the phrase, April showers bring May flowers, usually at an early age. It is a very popular and common phrase that comes up around this time. This little poem serves as a reminder that good things can come to those who wait. So enduring those cold, rainy, damp days April has to offer can bring an enjoyable sight and smell of flowers in May. This phrase puts an optimistic outlook on life when rains in April can foil your outdoor fun, like the blue and white game, or perhaps an outdoor picnic, or even a track meet. But do April showers really bring May flowers, or is this just a common misnomer? This phrase hasn't come about in the last 50 years. It has been around for almost half a millennia. Researchers have traced this phrase all the way back to the mid-1500s. An English poet and farmer, Thomas Tusser, compiled his writings in a book called 100 Points of Husbandry, where he wrote the short poem, Sweet April Showers, Dew Spring May Flowers. So far, April has brought us close to 5 inches of rain. I decided to talk to Rob Burgage, the Associate Professor of Horticulture right here at Penn State, to find out more about how rain affects plants.
If you've got plants that are not adapted to that type of an environment, you can have effects. A lot of our soils here in State College, though, unless they've been badly abused by construction or whatever, the Hagerstown loam or the sandy soils that we have, drain reasonably well. Thinking about this April showers bring May flowers sort of thing. The flowers that bloom in the spring tend to be mostly perennials, and the flowers, the plants were there before, so the growth of that plant is really more a function of what happened to it last year and into the fall, and then in the spring. They do need water, of course. If there's no moisture at all, they're not going to grow very well. But the amount of rain that we get in April really isn't going to affect the number of flowers that you get from most of the spring blooming stuff. Now, the amount of rain that we get right now is probably going to affect the amount of weeds that you're going to have to pull, though, because all of those seeds that are in the seed bank have basically really nice germination conditions because of all that extra moisture, and so we're going to have a really nice crop of weeds this year in a lot of people's gardens.
There are 2 kinds of flowers, perennials and annuals. Perennials are planted in the fall. Their roots stay alive when the plant you see above the ground dies, and also throughout the enduring winter. These flowers are usually the first thing you see turn green when spring is right around the corner. Perennials, just like people, have genetics. Only plant genetics tell the plant when it is time to grow. These plant genetics rely on things like day length, temperature, and even rainfall to tell that plant when it's time to sprout. Where you are located does factor into when these flowers will start to bloom. So if you're living in England, where this poem was originally written, or northeastern United States, your flowers are going to tend to bloom in May. Whereas if you live in the South, late March and early April is when your flowers will start to bloom. So to some extent, this little rhyme depends on where you live. Annuals are plants that are planted every year. Their lifespan and growth is influenced by the rain in the months after they are planted, not before. Some common annuals like petunias, marigolds, geraniums, tomatoes, and even cucumbers are planted after the last frost-free date. Once these are planted, they must receive enough water to stay healthy. A good rule of thumb, no pun intended, is to stick your thumb in the ground and see if you can feel moisture in the soil. Too much rain can beat down the flowers, or if the soil isn't draining properly, their roots can drown and kill them. April showers wouldn't have effect on annuals planted in May. Much to my surprise, the one area where this saying holds true always is the desert. One prime example in the U.S. is the Mojave Desert. In dry regions, plants sit under the sand for sometimes years, waiting for just enough water to spring up. Just a few weeks or even days after a heavy rainfall, the desert will burst of vegetation and color. In conclusion, this saying isn't all that true. All you need is a reasonable amount of moisture in the soil to keep the flowers ready to grow. Many of the things that bloom in May were already there well before those April rains. The blooming flowers will happen regardless of the many dreary days April brings. All you need is a reasonable amount of moisture. So the next time you hear this phrase, "Do April showers bring May flowers?" you will know what you're talking about. For Weather or Not, I'm Mary Sharkey.